I think that what had been happening in Ferguson was oppressive and objectionable and was worthy of protest. But there was no excuse for criminal acts. And whoever fired those shots shouldn't detract from the issue. They're criminals. They need to be arrested.
With Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth welcoming you into Hour 2 of America's Forum for this Friday. And we just heard once again our president with his first remarks about the Ferguson police shootings. They came during an appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live on ABC last night.
Yeah, the two officers who were wounded were released from the hospital yesterday, and a massive manhunt is now underway for the gunman. The incident, some would say, has only made a bad situation that much more worse. Now, community leaders and law enforcement are tasked with trying to find a way to tame that growing tension.
For more on the story, let's go to our friend John Turnipseed. He's the author of Bloodline. You spend enough time in hell, you get the feeling you belong. That's a title for a book. It's a compelling story. We should also point out that John is the vice president of Urban Ventures. And joining us from Newsmax, New York, Liz Peek, a columnist for the Fiscal Times. John, first of all, your reaction to the shooting of the officers in Ferguson.
I've been following the Ferguson movement, and I, in my mind, thought an injustice collector, and that's a person that waits for an opportunity where people are enraged to do something, would show up sooner or later. And that happened. You know, some coward, took advantage of a very heated situation to just stir the pot. And protesting without clear objectives and without a clear plan, it's just a heated argument, and things like this can happen.
Do you think, John, that the kinds of protests we've seen in Ferguson could spread to other communities which are looking into allegations of unfair police tactics? Is this something that could become a bigger and bigger issue in the United States?
Absolutely. I see the direction of the Ferguson movement. It's affecting us all over the United States, and it has, especially our kids. People that are basically injustice collectors will get into the minds and heads of our kids and make America an enemy of ours, and make the police an enemy of the world. And when you do that, things like this happen. And I think the problem starts at home. I have to teach my kids every day how I want them to act in the world, and we're not at home taking enough responsibility to make sure our kids are properly trained to come out and act in the world.
John, I want to get your take on this. We've been talking a lot about racial tensions in Ferguson, Missouri, but another issue that's come up is that this might be tied more to economics, that the police department there was issuing tickets basically to raise revenue. What are your thoughts about that? Is that being discussed enough?
Well, absolutely. In the community, the distrust of the police department, and when you can prove it, like speed traps and all of that kind of stuff, where police are just waiting to ticket someone, they raise a lot of revenue that way. But it's on the backs of poor folk, people that don't have the money and extra money to spend on a traffic ticket. I don't think law enforcement should ever be used as a fundraiser. So that tarnishes the image of the police department, and they should take a serious look at that.
John, Jeff Rurda of the St. Louis Police Officers Association spoke out about the Ferguson tension. In the wake of the shootings, he offered a specific solution. Let's listen, and then I'd like to get your reaction to it.
What I really think we need is a curfew. I think that it's unsafe for everybody out here after dark, not just the cops, but the protesters that really do have peaceful intents.
We've got about a minute left in this segment, John. Do you agree with Jeff Rurda? Should authorities have put a curfew in place last night?
No, I don't agree with that. You're talking about American citizens, grown adults. I don't think a curfew is warranted at this time, and I think it would harm the situation.
How so? We've got about 30 seconds remaining.
you know, when people are already feeling like they have been mistreated and abused and that power is out of control, and all of a sudden you put more power on top of them, you know, and more chance for incidences to happen, that just leads to more problems right now.
Fair enough. John, we're going to ask you to stay in place via Skype from Minnesota. We see Liz remains in place, as she'll be here the entire hour from Newsmax New York. Obviously, this story has so many different facets, and John has such an interesting personal story that we want to discuss it in full with him, both what happened to him personally and what has transpired in Ferguson. All that and more ahead.
This was not someone trying to bring healing to Ferguson. This was a damn punk, a punk who was trying to sow discord in an area that is trying to get its act together and trying to bring together a community that has been fractured for too long.
Strong words from Attorney General Eric Holder as we continue here on America's Forum with Miranda Kahn here on the anchor desk, J.D. Hayworth. Joining us via Skype from Minnesota, author, community activist John Turnipseed, and from Newsmax New York, columnist Liz Peek. John, I listened to the Attorney General, and here's the problem I have. Last week, almost in passing, he mentioned that the hands up, don't shoot slogan was a, quote, false narrative in the wake of Ferguson. In my opinion, it looked like the Attorney General and others were advancing that false narrative. Now you have him yesterday, and we welcome the fact he spoke out strongly, but I just have to ask you, and maybe you can help me with this, is the Attorney General trying to have it both ways?
You know, one of the things, politicians are politicians. That's what they do, you know, and they're going to shake it either way, you know, the wind blows best for them sometimes. And, you know, I don't know what exactly was on his mind, but if he's taking two different paths and a situation does not help America, you have to, you know, figure out, first off, what you want to do, stand on it, and be strong with it, you know. So I'm never for anyone that, you know, wavers one way or the other. If you're for something one day, be for it tomorrow.
John, you mentioned earlier that you thought not having a curfew or having a curfew would be a bad idea. How do you diffuse the situation now, especially in light of what just happened?
Well, you know, at times like this, if this was happening in Minneapolis, I would ask that the leaders or so-called leaders of Minneapolis come out in a strong, united front, and that they're out there when the protesters are out there. They're out there when the news cameras are not out there, diffusing the situation. I personally think that in Minnesota, if I was doing a protest, I have my own security force made up of men and women that I've known for years, you know, that they don't carry guns, they're not police officers, but they're in the crowd. They're making sure that we're not going to do anything that disrupts the positive flow that we're trying to have. And I think the protesters have a responsibility to make sure that their protesters are doing the right things and that there's no enemy in the camp. So it comes in both forms. The police have to show some restraint, but the protesters, if you're going to do something, you need to be in control of it.
John, that is a very reasonable point of view, and it kind of raises a question about why would Al Sharpton have a seat at the table in this kind of discussion and this kind of confrontation? Isn't he just fomenting racial tensions, and isn't that his stock and trade?
Well, you know, Al is a difficult conversation because, you know, Al has done some very good things and has created some fires sometimes, you know, and as a black man, you know, we're always sort of touchy about criticizing one another, but, you know, sometimes Al makes some mistakes. And right now, his position there is not a very strong one. I don't really feel a sense of him taking control of the situation in a positive fashion. So, but he's doing something, but I don't quite agree with his tactics at this time. So that's where I'm at.
John, we have about 2 minutes remaining. You told us your very compelling personal story when you first joined us a while back. A lot of new people have come to the program since then. Could you tell us what happened in your life that led you to start this ministry of reconciliation? We have about 1:30 remaining.
Well, most of my life I was misinformed by some very misinformed people, and situations like Ferguson would have been right up my alley for destruction. The people around me, militant groups and things of that nature, were always preaching hatred of the police and hatred of people of other colors and things of that nature. So I went a very destructive path in my life, and fortunately, there's a lot of good people in the world, and some people reached out to me at a time when I was probably in the most trouble I've ever been in, and seen some good in me and supported that good instead of supporting the evil. So I know what's happening to those kids in Ferguson. They need positive support. They need leaders that are willing to stand in the trenches with them in a positive fashion, showing them how to be men and women.
And the positive aspect of what can come out of these tragedies, the lesson that worked in the life of John Turnipseed, it is chronicled in his book, Bloodline. You spend enough time in hell, you get the feeling you belong. But earthly redemption and an eternal spirit came to John Turnipseed. You can read about it in his book, Bloodline. John, we very much appreciate your time, your thoughts, and your very personal story. It's good to have you with us. When we come back, Liz stays with us at Newsmax New York. We're also joined there by co-authors J.M. Berger and Jessica Stern. They have written a new book about ISIS and the threat it represents. We'll talk to them right after this timeout.